Hello everyone, welcome to today's tutorial where we are going to be talking about Python iteration. And in our previous lecture, we've spoken about Python statements. We got started with if statements, how we can use if, elif, and else. And we also looked at how we can work with more advanced operators. We worked with comparison operators, how to do the and or logic. So if you have not watched that video, please do well to go back to that video and watch that video. It's very, very important for you to get the basic understanding of what we're going to be treating in this lecture. All right. So for this lecture, we're going to be learning about Python loops. And the first thing we're going to get started with is we're going to get started with the Python for statements. All right. So what is the Python for statement in a nutshell? All right. So the Python loops actually is an iterator in Python, right? So just take a loop at it as helping you to perform iterative tasks. And when I mean iterative tasks, I'm talking about tasks that are repetitive, right? So for example, you want to do something over and over again, and writing each lines of code one by one is going to take time. So Python loops will basically help you to do iterative tasks, right? To do repetitive tasks. All right. So just take a look at any time that you have an problem you're trying to solve, which is going to be an iterative task, which is going to be repetitive, right? So that's where you go ahead to use for loop. All right. Good morning, Amit. I hope you are doing well. All right. Morning, Diamond. Trust you guys are doing well. All right. So without any further ado, let's get started with the Python for statement. All right. So it goes through items. Python for loops goes through items in a sequence or any other iteratable item, right? So any item that is basically iteratable, Python for loops will actually go through that. And um, you know that we've talked about objects in our previous lecture, right? So it could iterate over strings of objects, right? It can iterate over lists, it can iterate over tuples, it can iterate over dictionaries, right? Such as key and their value pairs. So it just depends on what you want to use it for. And we're going to take a look at some examples in today's lecture. All right. So the general format for loop is just by writing let's say you have a for statement, so you have for. So the for is the keyword here that you use to run any for loop task, right? So you have the for, then you have your item in objects, right? Something like this, right? And you have the semicolon. Remember what semicolon is? So this, I'm just using this to explain, right? Remember what semicolon is in our previous when we talked about if statement. Or I can see you guys are popping up already. Lady Black, David, Slim, Christian. Good morning. Trust you guys are doing well. All right. So remember how we did our if and else statement where we have this semicolon, right? So once you do semicolon and you click enter, you have to use there has to be an indentation, right? Remember what an indentation is. Indentation is just tab, is a tab. So if you see your keyboard, the tab that is above your caps lock, you just hit that once after writing four statements. If you go and write your next statement here, it's going to be an error. So you have to hit the tab. All right. So that's how you do it in Python, in for loop also, right? So after you have your tab here, then what you can just do is you can just have some statements to do stuffs, right? So generally, this is how for loop would actually work. Right. Okay. So let me see if I can. Right. Exactly. So this is how for loop works when you are working with it. Right. So let me just add an header here, and I'm gonna say for loop here. Right. Right. So this is how basically for loop works. Right. I'm going to add more notes before I upload this lecture to the if I upload this note to GitHub. So make sure to check the GitHub out after we are done with the class. All right. So let's take a look at different examples on how we can use for loop, right? So basically, we're going to be doing a lot of examples here just to get our hands dirty with for loops, all right? So I'm going to say example one. I'm going to use double asterisk here for example one. So escape M to mark down and run it, all right? So first thing first is I'm going to go ahead to say Ademola, good morning, all right? So first thing first is I'm going to create a list. So I'm going to say list one is equals to then I'm going to create different lists here. So here I can say, let's say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? I'm sure you guys already know how to do this, right? So that's why I was iterating on the previous classes that you have to understand the basics of the Python object that we're covering, right? So now we're just going to be doing example straightforward. We don't need to be going back and forth on it again, since we already understood how list works and how dictionaries and all of that works, all right? So if you do not really understand that, please go back to the lecture and watch the previous video, all right? So first thing first is I'm going to go ahead to say create a new list, right? And I'm just going to run this cell, all right? So let's say we want to print out item 1, for example. How are we going to do that? We're going to say what? List 1. Then we're going to say 0 here, right? We'll print out the first item, which is using the index number, all right? I'm sure you guys understand this already. If you do, just type yes in the comments so I can know you guys are following me. All right. So, but how about if I want to print out these two? Right. So how about if I want to print out 2? What is going to happen? Right. So basically, what I'm going to do is okay. So uh okay. So what is going to happen is if I want to print out 2, I'm going to say what again? List 1, then then sorry, then 1, because that's the next index. That's the next index, right? So 2 is going to come out. If I want to print out 3, what's going to happen? I'm going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and basically once it comes to once it comes to working with iterative tasks, you would notice something, right? You would notice that, oh god, my network. Uh, sorry, a call came in and I had to stop it. So let me just try to see if I can bring this back. All right, please let me know if you guys can hear me in the comment section. So if you guys can hear me in the comment section, just say yes, I can. A call came in, so I want to make sure that we're good to go. Okay, yes, yes, you can hear me. All right, very good. Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds good. So let me confirm from my end here also, just to make sure that we are good to go. Okay, yes, you can hear me. Okay, 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 very good. Very good. Very good. Thank you for confirming that, Amit Ademola Taiwo Rashid. Okay, let's continue. All right, sounds good. So now I'm saying that I was saying that how about if you want to print out all of this item in this list, right? You will see that it's going to be quite taxi for us, right? And what do I mean by quite taxi? It's going to be like we're going to have to start um running through the index number one by one, right? We're going to start running through the index number one by one, and we're going to start checking, right? Index 0 prints, index 1 prints, index 2 prints, index 4 and 5 and all of that prints one by one, right? So when it comes to coding and you notice that you are doing something that is quite lengthy, that it's something that is repeated, right? So like what is changing here is just the index number, but we're still writing the variable name over and over again, right? So that's when you should start noticing that you have to use a loop for that particular challenge, right? It can be a loop, it can be a function or method. We're going to talk more about function and methods in our upcoming lecture, right? But what I want you to know is when it comes to tasks that are being repetitive, that are occurring over and over again, then you should have an idea that you can use iterations for that, which is for loop, right? So we have different iterations in Python. We have the for loop and we have the while loop. We're going to talk more about the while loop in our upcoming lecture. But for now, let's focus on for loop, all right? So I'm going to go back to my screen right now. And what you can do is you can use a for statement, right? So I'm going to say for, right? So watch what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to say for, right? So let me create more cell below, all right? I'm going to say for, all right. I'm going to say for norm in list one. So now, what is happening here? What I'm saying is, I'm saying for norm, right? So this norm is going to represent each item in this index, in this list. So I'm saying for norm in list one. So what I'm saying is, for this first index number, I'm saying for norm in list, right? So now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to say for norm in list into brackets. I'm going to print into brackets, into parentheses. I'm going to print norm. So let's see what we have first. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying that I iterate over this list, right? And for each element in this list item, they put it to be as norm, this variable name that is here. So I'm saying for norm, so this norm is going to be a variable that's going to represent each of this item one by one when it's iterating. When it's iterating. So for norm in list one, print out norm. So let's see what's going to happen first. So if I run this, you will see that it's now printing what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So that means that this is running over and over again. And while it's running over and over again, it's checking for the first item in the list and it's printing it out, right? So after it's done printing it out, it will come back here again, right? Check for it again, print it out till it gets to the end. All right. So that means if we are doing this, there are certain way we can there are certain things we can use, there are certain logics we can check, right? So there are certain logics we can check to verify if we want to print out like a particular number or if we want to do a particular logic, right? So for example, if I want to print out 5, if I want to say like okay, let me say if I want to print out um the if I want to print out an odd number here right now, right? I want to put an odd number in this particular place, right? So this first example is just to, let me just say, iterate iterate through a list, right? So let's say now for this list, now let's say I want to print out only the odd numbers that are here, right? So remember what we did in our previous lecture. Remember, right? We used the if statement to check if the number is divisible by 2. Remember that 0, then it's an even number, right? So we can actually do that logic here, right? So now example 2 is going to be, so let me just copy this. So remember what we did in our previous lecture, like when we say if, like say if 10 modulus 2, 10 modulus. So if 10 modulus 2 is equals to 0, right? We know that statement is an even, that number is an even number, right? So for this one, the remainder is 0. So if we do like 11, or let's just say 7 modulus 2, remainder is 1. So we can use this to check the total number of even numbers and odd number that we have in this list, right? So that will be our next example. So our next example is to what? Print out the even numbers and odd numbers in the list, right? So this will be example 2. So mark down, escape M, then run this, all right? So we're told to print out the even numbers and odd numbers in the list. How can we do that, right? We can still use that for statement again, all right? So we can use the for statement, and what we can say is we can say for number, right, in what list 1, all right, semicolon, enter. Now I can see that we have to check for if the particular number is an even number or odd number, right? So what I can say is I can say if, right, if norm modulus 2 is equals to what? 0, right, semicolon, then enter. You can see that once we hit semicolon, we hit enter, there's a tab here. And for if statement also, once we hit semicolon and we click enter, there's also an indent here. So one indent and the second indent, which is for the for loop, right? So one indent for for loop and the next indent here, which is for if statement. That's where we're going to start our statements, all right? So now I can say if number divided by 2 is equals to 0, I can say print, right? I can say print, and I'll just say, and I'll use the f string right here, right? And I'll say print the number then into square bracket. I'll put the variable name here, num. So that means the number that is iterating through that current time, the number is an even number, right? Now let's check another else. So else, obviously, if the number is not an even number, then we all know that it's an odd number, right? So we can say else, then we'll just say print, then we'll use f string right here, and I'll say the number, then I'll put into parentheses here, num is an odd number, right? So now let's take a look at this together. What are we doing here? It's simple, right? So the first thing we're doing here is we know that we are iterating through the list of item through the item that we have in our list, right? That's what we're doing here. And we know that each time is iterating, num is going to be 1, it's going to be 2, it's going to be 3, it's going to be 4, and so on and so forth, right? So and we're not checking that, okay, if num is 1, for example, right? So I'm going to say if num is 1, so I'm going, if 1 modulus 2 is equals to 0, then that means it's an odd number, right? So but if 1 modulus 2 actually give us would not be equals to 0, so that means that it's going to fall in this else statement. All right, so to print out the number 1 is an odd number, right? So the next one again, num is not going to be 2 next. Remember, it's iterating. So once it's 2, it will come back here to check if 2 modulus 2 is equals to 0, then obviously it's going to print out what the number is, an even number. So let's run this together. So you can see that now we have the number 1 is an odd number, the number 2 is an even number, the number 3 is an odd number, and so on and so forth. All right, I hope you guys are following me in the chat. All right, so you can see how useful for loops can actually be, right? And let's go ahead to do more examples to even have like more in-depth about the for loop statements. All right, so now that we've seen that, right, so let's say that we're given another exercise. So let's say we're told to, so example 3 is will be to be add all the items in the list together and display the results. So these are another common examples of for loop, right? So the common examples of loop that you're going to be seeing mostly is like iterate through the list or through the string, um check for a certain condition inside a for loop. So another one that is also common is you can be told to add all the elements in a list, right? So for example, you can be told to add all the odd numbers in a list or all the even numbers in a list, or basically just do some simple mathematical operations. All right, so but let's take it easy first and let's look at how we can add all the items in the list. All right, so let's print out our list 1. Let's see what we have there. Remember, we still have 1 to 10. All right, so let's say that we want to go ahead to add all the numbers here. What's going to happen? So first thing that we need to do is we need to have a variable that is going to store all the list item, right? So all the summary or all the sum of all the additions of everything we're going to be doing, we need a variable that is going to go ahead to add that together for us. All right, so first thing first is I'm going to go ahead here to just say that list, or let me just say list. Okay, list underscore sum will be equals to 0 first. All right, so now what do I mean by this? What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to say that, okay, the first thing that I need to do is we need to have a variable that's going to be storing all the additions of our list. All right, so first thing first is we have 0. The total sum is 0. We don't know the sum yet. All right, so what can we do now? We have to iterate through the list, sum the numbers up together, and be adding it into our list sum variable. All right, so let's take a look at it together. So yeah, I'm going to say for num in list 1, right? So for num in list 1, so this tree should be in. All right, very good. So if you are noticing that is the intent um is not basically working after you click tab, after you click enter, there should be an index here. If you're noticing that it's not working, then that means there should be an error somewhere up there. All right, you can see for my case I didn't put I, so let me create more cell below. All right, so I'm saying that for num in list one, what I can say is I can say list underscore sum will be equals to what? List underscore sum plus number. Now, what am I doing? I'm saying that the first item is going to be what? 1, right? So I'm going to say list sum is equals to what? 0. Sorry, it's going to be 0 first here. I didn't write 0, right? So the list sum is 0 at first, right? So I'm going to say the list sum will be equals to what? 0 plus 1. Right, so that means our list sum. Remember when we talked about variable iteration, right? I'm sorry, reassigning of variables in our previous lecture, right? So in Python, you can modify variables. You can change the variable name, for example, right? So for example, if I say a is equals to 1 here, right, and I print out a, I can go ahead to say a will be equals to 3, right? So if I print out a right now, you can see my a is 3. All right, so this variable reassignments. All right, so what is now happening here? I'm not saying that okay, list sum will be equals to 0 plus the first item will be what? 1. So that means my list sum is going to be 1. Then to come back here again, run the loop again. So now my list sum is now 1. It's now be list sum is now equals to what? 1 plus the next item here, which is what? 2. So now be 1 plus 2. Then my list sum is now going to be 3. I hope you guys are following me. So that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to be happening throughout. So if I go ahead to run this cell right now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to run it, right? So if I run it, you see nothing is going to happen, right? So that's because I'm not printing out anything. So if I go ahead to print out, if I go ahead to print list sum, right? You can see here we now have what? 55. Let me just delete this cell. Just d. All right, so you can see that list sum is 55, and basically why is it 55? What it did is it went ahead to iterate through the list and it summed the number up together. All right, so I hope you guys are following what I'm saying. So you can see how follow up is actually very, very useful. Basically, if you are doing follow up for the first time, it might seem confusing, right? So what I need you to do is I want you to practice this by yourself. So as you're watching this video, be practicing it along too on your laptop or on your device. All right. So it's very, very important because it really, really help you to understand and have the idea about how follow works in general. All right. So let's continue. Let's basically do more examples. All right. So we've seen how we can iterate through list of items. All right. So let's take a look at another example. Maybe let's look at let's say example 4. Let's say we've already used list with we've already used for loop with lists. All right. So let's take a look at string. So let's see how we can use for loops with strings. So escape M. All right, so let's look at how we can use for loop with strings. So for this example, I'm going to say for, I can say for letter, right? So this letter is just a variable name I'm using that's going to be representing each item while I'm looping. All right, so this one too also is a variable name I'm using. It can be anything, right? Most common example that you see when you're starting out is I. You see some people saying for I in list, or maybe for number, they can write number fully. So it's just a variable name that's going to be here, right? So that's one thing you should take note of. All right, so right here we're going to say for letters, for letter, so for letter in, so let's put a string right here. So I'm just going to say this is a string. All right, so for letter in, this is a string. So what is happening right here is that Python is going to use for loop to actually check for each item in the string. All right, so for example, I'm going to do semicolon here and enter. And what I'm going to do right here is just to print out the letter, right? So I'm going to say print. I'm going to say print letter. So what do you think is going to happen here? I want you guys to tell me in the comment section, right? If I run this particular code, what do you think is going to happen? All right. So let me hear you guys. If you guys are following me, let me see from the comment section. All right. So if I go ahead to run this code like this, what would get printed out? All right. I hope you guys can hear me in the comment section. All right. So just take a look at it as an example of what we did in our previous example, right? When we did list and we did for number in list one and we printed out number, it went ahead to print out what the number one by one. All right. So one by one. So same thing is going to happen right here also. So for letter in this particular string, all right. So it's going to go ahead to take this one by one, D H I S is and all of that, right? So if I go ahead to run this, and you can see now that it's printing out what DTHIS, then you can see that there's a space right here. It's going to print out that space, right? Because that is also a character in Python. All right. So it's going to print out. It's good. It's not going to be error, I mean, all right. So because of we are iterating through the list, through the string, it's going to print out the item, right? So that's why I stated it in the when we are starting that we can use for loop to iterate through different objects, right? So the string, the if you are using string, if you are using um list, dictionaries, basically anything that is basically iteratable, right? So anything that you can print out one by one is going to print out everything. So it's not going to be error. Taye. All right. So and that's one of the interesting part about lists, about for loops rather, because it helps you to actually to run through each certain condition in a particular list. All right. So now, since we have seen an example of string, we're going to do more complex example, right? But I just wanted to show you guys what is possible with for loop and some basic data types that we have, right? So the string and list. So let's take a look at how we can use for loop with tuples. All right. So for example, I can say my top. So let me just say example 6, or is it 6 or 5 right now? Example 5, I'm going to say um iterate through a tuple and print out the items there. All right. So escape M. I'm almost forgetting that. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to create myself video. And right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create a tuple, TUP. Also, my tuple is equals to, remember how to create tuple is to do what? To use the parentheses, all right? So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Don't need to come out here again, all right? All right. So yeah, I'm going to say for I in, or let me just say for T in tuple, in tup, right? So I'm going to say print out into brackets T. All right. So you can see now that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So you can basically do the same thing over and over again. All right. So let me quickly do one quick exercise for you. So let's say we are giving, sorry, let me just say we are giving an example 6 right now. So I'm going to say for the task will be to print out all the sum of the even numbers and the odd numbers in a list item, in a list rather. All right, so escape M. Right, so let's check our list one. So now we are giving this exercise right now. So the exercise is to basically print out the sum of all the even numbers and the odd numbers in a list. All right. If we were to do this manually, what we're going to do is we're going to say list 1 plus list um 3 plus list 5 plus list um so let's do it manually to see um how stressful this can be. All right. So if I say, for example, I want to print out all the sum of the even numbers, I'll say list 1, then I'll take the index number of what 1, right? because index number one is 2, and I'll say plus. So I have to copy this again. Control C, Control V. I would say plus list 3, Abi, because 0, 1, 2, 3, right? 4 is an even number. And I'll say again plus, paste it here again. I'll say plus 5, because 6 is an even number. I'll say plus, I'll say, yeah, I'll say plus 7, right? And I'll say plus what again? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7. So this should be index 9. This should be index 9 plus list 1. I will say take what? 9. Let's just confirm, because 9 should basically give us 11. All right. Sorry, 10. If I say list into bracket 9, we should get list 1 rather. We should get 10. All right. So this will basically be the sum of all the even numbers. So let me run this sum. I can see that the sum of the even numbers here is 30. All right. Now let's do for the odd numbers. So for the odd numbers, it's going to be the same thing, same stress, right? I'm going to say, yeah, instead of 1, I'll start with 0. And yeah, I'll go with 0. Then I'll go with 2, right? Then yeah, I'll go with what? 4. Then yeah, I'll go with what? I'll go with 6, right? And yeah, I'll go with what? 8, right? So that should be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So you should have the sum of all the odd numbers here. So the sum should be what? 25, right? And it's correct because when we did the total sum right here, it was 55, right? So that means 30 plus 25 should give us 55, all right? All right. All right. So basically, oh, that was why it was happening. Okay, so basically what we can do right now is um we can use for loop to do this instead of us doing it manually. All right. All right, very good. So we can say for number, you see how this is actually very interesting. And the reason why this is not an efficient way is, how about if I go ahead to add new item to the list? For example, if I add like 11 to the list, or if I add 11 to the middle of 3 and 4, then that means everything that we wrote here is not going to work again, because the index number would have changed. All right. So the proper way to approach this problem will be to use for loop and the if statement. All right. So for example, the first thing I'm going to say is, before I even start writing for loop, I'm going to say, so let me just write this. I'll just write this. Yeah, I will say, doing this the manual way. All right. So doing this the manual way, this will happen. But now let's use, so using for loop approach. All right. So using for loop approach, how are we going to do this? First, we need a variable that's going to store the sum of the even numbers and of the odd numbers also. So I'm going to say even underscore sum will be equals to what? 0, because at first we don't know what the total sum is, right? I'm going to say odd underscore sum will be what? Equals to 0 also, because we don't know the total sum of what we have in the list yet, assuming we don't know. All right. So I'm going to say for num, I can say for number, or let me just use the number what we're using before. So for num in list 1, right? What are we going to do? We want to check some logics first. We want to check first. We want to check if that num modulus 2 is equals to 0, right? Then basically we know that is an even number, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say even underscore sum plus equals to num. Now, what am I doing here, right? Remember in our previous lecture we talked about operators in Python. Basically, what it means here is it's the same thing as what I did here, right? So if I come back here right now, right, and let me just create a new cell below here, and I run this same cell, right? So if I run this same cell and I say plus equals to num, right, it's the same thing as this here. right? I hope you guys know this. I'm sure you guys know this already, because if I say list underscore sum plus equals to num, it's the same thing as saying list underscore sum is equals to list sum plus num. All right, so I hope you guys know this already. So if I run this and I try to also print out, so let me just call this, let's say new underscore sum, so that we don't get confused. So I'll say this and I'll print out what new underscore sum here. So you can see that we also have 55. All right, it's the same thing that we're doing right here. So what I'm saying here is also the same thing as, because I'm going to be using this mostly because it's shorter. It's the same thing as even underscore sum plus is equals to even underscore sum plus num. All right, so it's the same thing here. All right, so take note of that. All right, so I'm going to do that, and basically we already have for when it's an even number, we know that we're adding the sum together. All right, so yeah, I'm going to just put tab, or I'm going to say else, right? Else, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the odd number instead, right? So I'll say odd underscore sum will be equals to plus equals to what? Num. All right, so now what is happening here? So basically, if num, which is going to be first, is going to be 1. So if 1 modulo 6 is equals to 0, then it will add it to the even sum. If it's not equals to 0, then add it to the what? Odd sum. All right. So if I go ahead to run this cell, before I run this cell, let's go ahead to print out. So let's print out total even sum is, and I'll print out the what? Even sum. Right. So don't forget we have to use f string here. Right. And here I'm going to say print. I'm going to print out the total sum of the odd number also. So print int into brackets f string, right? And I will say total odd sum is, I'm going to say the odd sum here. So odd, I don't know why I'm always pressing s instead of d. All right, so total odd sum is this, and total even sum is. So if I run this cell, f string with match, so let's see what's happening here. So yeah, it should be curly brace. So if I run the cell again, you can see that now we now have the total even sum is 30 and total odd sum is 25. All right, now this makes sense, because if we go ahead to say, for example, if I say my new list one, so let me just copy this so I don't waste much of our time. If I say my new list one is this, all right, and I maybe just add like maybe I add another 7 right here, right? If I go ahead to run this cell, right, and I go ahead to copy this one, right, this same logic that we did here, if I go ahead to run it, you can see that it's saying that the total for the even number is 27, and for the odd number, if I run it again, you will see that so let me copy this. For the odd number now, it's not telling us that it's what? It's 25, which is not correct. If you do your calculations very well and you check it out very well, you see that it's not correct. But if I copy this logic that we did here and paste it right here, and if I run this cell, you can see it's going to give us the correct answer, right? So if you calculate it, if you take your time to calculate it, the total sum, you see that this is actually accurate, because it's checking the logic very well, right? So it's checking the conditions. If it's divisible by 2 and the numerator is 0, you can see that same stress. All right. So you can see that if you do this, you will see that this is the correct answer, basically, right? And that's the advantage of using for loop, and basically I'm making sure that um your logic is actually correct. All right. So in conclusion, we're going to actually do more examples on for loop, but just make sure you understand the basics of how it works. You don't need to cram much, just understand the basics, and once you understand the basics, once you want to do more complex tasks, you are going to see how useful it is. All right, so one thing I want to actually show you also is using while loop, right? So you can also use while loop. So let me just quickly show you an example of how to use while loop before we end the lecture. All right, so remember I told you that aside for loop, you can also use another statement in Python, which is to iterate through a particular list of items or strings or whatever. and it's also called for loop, right? It's just the same idea of how while loop works also. So let me just come here and create a new file. So I'm going to create a new file, Python file. So I'm going to go ahead to name this O4, right? So O4, we're working with what? While loop, right? So remember, while loops is also the same as for loop. It's just that the syntax is kind of different, and but it's also used to iterate through repetitive tasks. All right. So the same way of how you write for loop also. So let me just go ahead to write while loop here. All right. So escape M just to make this capital letter. Very good. So the first thing is, for example, if I say I have a number like x is equals to 0, for example, right? So I can use while loop. So the syntax is just saying while, right? While then the condition that you want to write here. So I can say while x, for example, y x, right, is less than 10, right? I'm gonna say print I'm gonna just say print x is currently, sorry, is currently, then I'm gonna print out x here. So I can use comma x, right? And I'll say print, and I'll say x is still less than 10, right? And I'm going to say adding 1 to x. So what am I trying to do here, right? So I'm trying to say that um I have this x here, 0, and I want to keep checking if my x is less than 10, right? So now x is 0 first, so 0 is less than 10, obviously. So to print out x is less than 10, x is currently 0, and to print out x is still less than 10, then it's to add 1 to x. So how can we add 1 to x? So we're going to iterate. I'm just going to say x plus equals to 1. Remember, it's the same thing as saying x is equals to x plus 1, all right? So what am I doing here? I want to keep checking for the condition if x is less than 10, right? So if it's less than 10, I'm going to keep printing out x value, and I'm going to keep saying that it's currently less than 10, all right? But once I keep adding, my x is going to be increasing, right? From 0 it will be 1, it will be 2, it will be 3, it will be 4, it keep adding 1. But while it now reaches 10, right, it's going to come and check, right? Don't forget, this statement that we write here is only going to run if it's true, right? So because 0 is less than 10, it's going to print out this. 1 is less than 10, it's going to print out this. But once x is not 10, right, it's not going to check is 10 less than 10. It's false because 10 is equals to 10. 10 is not less than 10. Then it's going to stop. All right. So let me run this and you will see what I'm talking about. So now you can see something that we have here, right? You can see now that we have what? X is currently 0, right? So x is less than 10, adding 1 to x. So that means I'm adding 1 to x. So now you can see that x is now currently what? 1, right? So it is just a way of checking logics and basically manipulating your code, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to print out x until x is no more longer less than 10. All right, that's what I'm trying to do. So um so if I come down here, you can see that it's not saying x is currently 9, x is still less than 10, adding 1 to x. So you can see that once it's 9, it's returned to 10, right? So but once it was 10, it's now did not satisfy this condition. Why? Because 10 is now equals to 10. So it went ahead to stop the loop. So this is just a way of this is a simple way of using while loop, and you can take a look at while loop um as how for loop works also, iterating through different tasks. All right, so let's do something very interesting. Let's say we want to print out multiplication table right now. So let's just say we want to print out the 5 multiplication table. So this also is to make it to understand while loop very well, right? Right, I have like several things coming up, right? So if I say, for example, here, if I say my multiplication table that I want to do is equals to 5, for example, right? I can use while loop to do this, right? And I'm going to say um the number number I'll say my max number is equals to 12. Right, so I want to do 5 times table from 5 times 1 to 5 times c up to 12. Right, so the maximum number is going to be 12. So I'm going to say wow max. Okay, so I'll say, you know what, let's do something. All right. Yeah, I would say I'll initialize where I'm going to be starting from first. Yes, so I'll say my point, my start underscore point will be equals to 1. Right, so I'm going to say while start point is less than the max number, sorry, than the max number. I'll explain this, all right? So what I'm saying is, I'm saying from 1 first. So if 1 is less than 12, then to print out the multiplication table, right? So to go on over and over till it reach the max number, right? So I'll say if start point is less than equals to, not only less than, because we want to print out the 12 times table also. So I'm going to say while start point is less than equals to max number, I'm going to say print, right? I'm going to say print. I'm going to use f string here, and I'm going to say, right, I'm going to say mul times, and here I'm going to say start points. All right, is equals to, yeah, I'm going to say mul times start points. Now, what is happening here? Focus very well. All right, sometimes it can be quite tricky. All right, hi Drish, you're welcome. So sometimes it can be quite tricky. You have to focus very well. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying using f string, right? Remember, whatever I put inside this coily brace is going to be a variable, right? So I'm saying that print mul, which was 5. Now this times here is just going to come out as times normally, right? It's not going to be doing anything. It's just a fancy way of saying of just displaying the times, right? So I'm going to say start point, and you can see my start point currently is what? 1. So it's going to say 5 times 1 is going to be equals to, then it's going to do the calculation here. Or you know what? Instead of us confusing ourselves, what we can do is we can say mul will be equals to I will say let me say answer. Let me just say answer will be equals to what? Um mul times the current value of the what start point. start point, right? And here, instead of me doing the multiplication table here, I'm just gonna say answer here. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to explain, right? So I'm saying start point is less than equals to max number. Don't forget, start point is what? 1. So 1 is less than equals to 12, right? So my answer will now be equals to what? 5, which is what? Which is mul, right? That's multiplication table we're trying to do. So 5 times start point is currently is 1, right? So 5 times 1 is going to give us what? 5, right? So what's going to happen right now is going to say it's not going to print out mul, which is 5, which is constant. We might not change that. Then the start point, which is what? 1 for now. And it's going to be equals to what? 5, because 5 times 1 is 5, all right? And here I'm going to say what? Start point, right? Start point plus equals to what? 1. So I'm going to increment start point so that start point will change from 1 to 2, right? So once it's 2, it's going to come here and check is 2 less than equals to max number, which is 12, and that's true. Yes, it's going to come back here and say answer will be equals to what? 5, which is multiplication, right? Mul, which is 5, times our start point now is not 2 because we've already incremented it by 1. All right, so it's going to say that will be 10. So it's going to print out what? Mul times start point will be equal, which should be equals to what? 10. All right, so add one more again to it. It's now be what? 3. So to keep iterating till it reaches 12. Now if it reaches 12, it's 12 less than equals to max number, which is yes, because 12 is equals to 12. Don't forget all statements. One must be true. Remember, if I come here and open this what we did, remember in our previous lecture, right? True or false will basically give us give us true. All right. So to run this again, then our start point is now going to be incremented from 12 to 13. So 13 is not less than equals to max number. Obviously, 13 is greater than 12. Then it's going to stop the loop. All right. So let's run this and see how it's going to be like. So then if I run this, you can see right now that we have our beautiful times table, right? 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, and so on and so forth till we reach 60. If you want to do this manually, trust me, you would have to write this line by line, and it's going to take time. All right. So you can see how interesting loops can be, especially if you know how to use them very well. All right. So that's something that is very, very interesting about loops if you also tend to look at them very well. All right. So one thing that I want to just introduce you guys before we end the lecture is about break and continue. All right. So the break and continue statement is actually used to, let's say you want to stop the loop from working when it reach some certain condition, or you want to just keep it, right? So for example, let's say we have so the best way of actually understanding loops is by doing example, right? So let's look at it together. So let's say we want to um work on a particular logic where we have to check for some certain condition to make sure that our code does not get executed once we get there. Then we can use break and continue for that. All right. So let me just go ahead to write that here. So let me just write break, break, continue. All right. Break and continue. All right. So let me just run this escape M. All right. All right. So for example, if I say my x is equals to 0, right, and I'm saying that my x is less than 10. So while x is less than 10, then I'm putting a semicolon right here. So yeah, I can say print. So we're going to be checking for the value of x every time we're iterating. All right. So I'm going to say print into brackets x is, let's say explain that x is currently, I can use f string right here, but it's just, I can just use comma right here to also display, since we're not doing much of a thing right here. So right, I'm going to say print. I'm going to say print x is still less than 10, right? Adding 1 to x. All right. And here I'm going to say x plus equals to 1, right? X plus equals to 1. All right. So it's just the same thing that we did here in the beginning, right? So now we're not going to check that if x is equals to 3, right? We're going to say print out x, print out, right? Um, x is equals to 3, right? And now, okay, you know what? Instead of me printing out x equals to 3, let me just say x. Let's just print out x equals to 3, all right? Because there are going to be a lot of text printing out, all right? So I'm going to say print out x is equals to 3, and I'm going to say else, right? So the one thing I noticed that you guys might really get confused on is the indentation, right? But just know that while if you are still inside, if you are still writing your while loop logic or your for loop logic, you have to keep that indentation. It has to be steady, right? And if you have another if statement, you have to keep that indentation again, right? So if you want to keep writing inside this if statement, that's where you now keep writing under the same indentation. But since I'm starting a new else statement, I don't need to keep that indent. I just need to maintain the indent of the while loop. All right. So I'm going to say else print continuing, right? And I'm going to say continue. So what I'm trying to say here is While I'm checking through everything, I have a lot of message coming up right here, right? So, but what I'm saying right here is I'm saying that once x is equals to 3, is to print out x is equals to 3. But if x is not equals to 3, it's going to go ahead to say continue, right? It's not going to print out continuing, right? So if I run this cell, you will see that you can see first is saying that what x is equals to 0, then x is less than 10, adding 1 to x is to continue, right? Because x is not 3, right? So it's going to keep continuing, right? It's going to keep continuing running the code, right? But once x is less than, once x is equals to 3, you can see that it's printed out what x is what equals to 3. It did not print out continuing. All right. So because it's what it meets this certain condition, x is equals to 3, then that was why it went ahead to print out what x is equals to 3. All right. So now that's how continuous statement works, right? So basically, once it sees that condition, right, it's gonna go ahead to what print out the condition and keep running the code. All right. But how about if we want to stop, right? So let's say that I want to check that if x is equals to 3, I want to stop running the code. How can we do that? We can use something that is called what break statement, right? So instead of us continuing, we're going to stay right here, same thing, right? But yeah, I'm just going to say break, right? And what is going to happen is once x is equals to 3, it's going to stop, right? It's going to break the code. All right. So if I run this cell, all right. So once x equals to 3, I'm going to say break here, right here. Let me see, I'll run this cell again. Okay. Okay, we didn't define x equals to 0. Okay, let's run this. Now, the reason why this is not working is because if I go ahead to check my x right now, you can see that my x is 10, right? So it will not run because what x is 10 is what is less than 10. So we have to actually go ahead to what reassign x to be what 0, right? So obviously I already noticed that already because it was not seeing the logic, all right? So so if I go ahead to run this cell right now, you can see that now you can see that what x is 0, x is still less than 10 is to continue, x is 1 less than 10 continue, x is 2 to continue. But once x is equals to 3, you can see that it didn't even continue again. It's what it broke the statement, it broke the code, right? And that's how break statement works, right? You can use break statement to check if you want to stop working, or if you want to check some certain conditions to basically kill your code, or you want to check for maybe if the user tries to enter a number that is greater than something that you don't want, you can basically just break that code and just display to the user, hey, you've passed your boundary, or you've done something that it's out of bound or something like that, right? And that's how you can actually use break and continue statement in Python. All right. So these are basic examples of how you can do this. I hope you guys got to understand it very well. Don't worry, it's just the basics, right? Nothing complex. Just try to understand this very well, and you can go ahead to practice more. We're going to do more exercises on this. Especially we're going to do some fun exercises on this. So get prepared. And make sure you understand the fundamentals very well. If you can do this, trust me, you're going to be good to go, right? So just understand what was taught today in class. Try to practice more. You can go to W3 schools like I displayed in our previous meeting. Um, W3 school is a great source of is a great documentation from where you can practice Python exercises, right? We're also going to come up with some more fun exercise that we're going to give to you guys, so make sure you get prepared and all of that. All right. With that being said, I hope you guys got to enjoy this video. We got to learn about loops. It's very, very interesting topic in Python, especially if you can get to understand it very well. All right. So I can see you guys are really really happy. All right, from the comment section, which is interesting. All right. So with that being said, that's going to be the end of this video, and I'll see you guys in our next lecture. Bye bye.